Why did you write this book?
Thank you for that question. The reason that I wrote the book is the conversation started in the media. It started to heat up about immigration, and I realized that I had a story to tell, an obligation almost. It started to feel like an obligation to tell my story because I was an illegal immigrant as a child. My mother and I crossed over the Mexican border when I was 8 years old, and so I began to realize, as I heard all this rhetoric about people, they take our jobs, they don't want to learn English, the person they were talking about, one of the people they were talking about was me. And so this story had been rambling around in the back of my mind for a long time, actually as a source of some shame. It was something I never really wanted to share with people. And then I thought there would be great power in sharing the story. And so I began to write.
What has been the reaction when you tell people that you were an illegal immigrant?
I think there's a lot of surprise because I don't fit the profile, if you will. I don't fit into the mold that people have of what an illegal immigrant looks like. And I think that's one of the powerful components of my story is that illegal immigrants are everywhere, or the children of illegal immigrants are everywhere, and they're not only these people that can harm our society, which is the way they're being portrayed in the media, but they're also people who can contribute to our society. And so that's why I wanted to tell my story.
When did it come up for you the first time in your life? When did it show up as an issue?
Well, even before we crossed over the border, we had lived here before, and I grew up here really my whole life from when I was a baby until I was 6. And even as a young child, I knew that there were differences. My peers all went to kindergarten, for example, and when I was 5, and my parents didn't send me because we didn't have papers. They had overstayed their visa. They had come for 6 months to kind of save up money and go back home, and 6 months turned into a year and 2 years, and they're in their 39th year now. So life has a way of changing your plans. So as a child, I knew that it made us different somehow. And then when I was 6, we had to leave for a death in the family, and then we couldn't come back in.
So tell me a bit about, we don't want to tell everything in the book, but tell me a bit about the story, because people hear about crossing the border, they don't understand it. So you stayed longer. It wasn't a dramatic border crossing for you. It was, in fact, just staying longer than allowed.
Well, no. What happened was when I was 6, my mother's father died. And I think my parents had been lulled into a false sense of security because we had traveled. They'd overstayed their visa, and we had gone back to Argentina and then had been able to come back in when I was 2. And so at 6, when there was this death in the family and my mother's family needed her, they thought it would be, a 2-week trip. We'd go and we'd spend some time with the family during this hard time, and we'd come back. And what they didn't count on is that a few months before that, there had been a military coup in Argentina where my mother's family lived. And so a lot of Argentinians were trying to get out and trying to come to the United States. And we couldn't get back in. We couldn't get a visa. It took 2 years of trying various different things, and we couldn't get back in. My father had stayed behind here in the States, and so he was sending us money and trying. And finally, in desperation, he connected with some people, they're called coyotes, that smuggle people across the border. And so off to Mexico we flew. We were in Spain at the time, in another attempt to get back in. And he said, well, I've paid these people and they're going to get you in.
So you were too young to be aware of all of this events in your life.
Well, I was 8 since we had been out of the country, yes. And I don't want to say that I was a precocious 8, but I was an only child 8, and I was children should be seen and not heard, of that generation. And so I listened a lot, and I was expected to, just sort of cooperate. So I remember a great deal of it. Particularly, I think the crossing was very, not so much the crossing, but the waiting for the crossing. They put us on a shack at the border. We could see the border in the distance, and so that is really etched in my mind, and that's where my book picks up, in that shack, and that feeling of not knowing. We basically didn't exist at that point. So that really was in my mind.
So what would you say to the people who fear illegal immigrants, and what is your feeling about illegal immigrants?
It's a good question. I believe that the people that vilify illegal immigrants, they talk about we need illegal immigration reform. Well, there's a spectrum. The people who say we should kick them all out, I do understand the need for a country, a sovereign nation needs to secure its borders. So I believe that part of the conversation comes from a place of, concern and goodness. But I think what's missing from the conversation, one of the things that made me really want to come out and tell my story, is the human element. I think we have 12 million people that are all being painted with one broad brush of, they take our jobs and they commit crimes and they bring diseases into the country and all of those things. And what I'd like to say is there are all different kinds of people. And I think in a nation that really believes in itself and in the dream that America is, I think that if we were creative in what we can accomplish, we could assimilate these people and make productive, good citizens out of them instead of treating them like a scapegoat for a lot of the problems that we have here.
How was it for you and your family to become citizens?
It was almost like a fairy tale ending. I had a really hard time throughout school. We finally sent me to parochial school because my parents were afraid of public school. And still at the end of high school, it was a blank. I couldn't get a driver's license. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't, leave the country. The kids in my class, went on a trip abroad. I couldn't go. And it seemed like after graduation, it would all be over. I had no future. And the year that I was a senior in high school, the amnesty bill was passed under the Reagan administration, and I was able to get my papers.
So you have positive feelings about that experience and Ronald Reagan, I would guess.
Well, it's funny. My political inclination has changed somewhat since the 80s, but I have to say on a personal level, I'm very grateful for that legislation. So,
how would you characterize any of your other relatives and their feelings about this country? Do they see themselves as American citizens, or do they see themselves as Argentinians without a home?
Well, the only family I have here are my mother and father, and everyone else is still in Argentina. And I have a younger brother who was born here, so he's had the full American experience, and for that I'm very grateful. And I think my parents, it took them a long time because they did come with this idea of we'll be there for a little while and then we'll come back home. So it took a long time, but they're Americans now, and contributing. No one's doing anything remarkable that you'd write about in the paper, but I think that's the part of the story. It's that we have just regular, good, hardworking people that we should embrace. So they're doing well.
Let's go back and talk to the high school kid right now who is in your situation, who's grappling with knowing that they're not legal, knowing that they want to be here. What do you advise to overcome that feeling of difference and to gain acceptance? What do you say to that young person?
I think that being an American is an amazing thing, and it's been one of the greatest blessings in my life, but it's not the only thing that gives you worth. And so that you should feel that you have inherent worth and act as if you have inherent worth and explore your talents and really do the best that you can. And it's a difficult situation, so I'm not trying to downplay what it feels like to not know what the future is, but just to continue to tap into what's good about you. The fact that you don't have papers, it's not a reflection on who you are.
Is there anything that I've not asked you that is important? Because again, my experience is not yours. Is there anything you'd like to say that I've not addressed with you?
I think you've been very generous with your time. I'm very grateful. I just would like to reiterate that it's not about all of us believing the same thing. It's about having a conversation that really keeps the goodness and the importance of each human spirit in mind. So, with that's really all.
Can you say the name of your book again?
It is called Illegal: Growing Up Unwanted in America.
Thank you, Marie Andreu.